Tonight we're commemorating the anniversary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the seventh Rebbe of Chabad, formally taking the leadership position of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, and essentially taking the position and the responsibility to be the leader of a generation. Rabbi come.
We got a CD, sir.
I want to thank everyone for finding the place on 423 10th Avenue. I don't know why, there was a lot of confusion when we sent out the invitation on I think last Thursday. It said come to Farbrengen on Wednesday. There was no time to put on it. Then there was a reminder that you should come at 7:30. And then I think today a new reminder came out and said please come at 7. So in order to apologize for all of this, I want to explain to you why this really will be very, very beneficial for all of us. They say a story about a Mr. Silverberg who was very, very charitable. He had a really good heart, and he gave a lot of tzedakah. And he was not very observant himself, but tzedakah he gave, charity he gave. Always when he would give the charity, the rabbis and the people that were in charge would say, oh, you know, with this charity, you're going to go straight to heaven, straight to heaven. So he was not frightened of dying. Sure enough, the time comes and he goes straight to heaven. And as soon as he gets to heaven, he's expecting that he'll go straight to paradise, Gan Eden. To his surprise, they tell him, you know, before you come into paradise, you need a purification. And it's a little bit uncomfortable in that place called purgatory. So he says, 1 second, that's not right. I mean, I always give charity. They always told me you're going to go straight to heaven. He said, you are. You're in heaven. But they never told you that heaven is large, and there's a lot of different places. So he said, oh. They said, but you know what? Because you're such a great person, and you gave so much tzedakah, we're going to allow you to choose which place in purgatory you could go. He says, what are my choices? He says, well, we have a section for Ashkenazim, we have a section for Sephardim, we have a section for Hasidim. So he says, well, let me know the choices. What happens in hell for the Ashkenazim? He said, well, they wake you up at 6 in the morning, and they make you walk on hot coals, and then there's an angel that hits you with a whip of fire, and so the day goes. He says, oh my gosh, that's rough. Maybe I should pick the Sephardic one. What do they do in the Sephardic place? He says, well, they wake you up at 6 in the morning, and they make you walk on the hot coals, and then an angel comes and hits you with a whip of fire, and so the day goes. He says, oh my gosh, well, what do they do in the Hasidic one? He says, well, they wake you up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you walk on the coals, and the angel comes and whips you, and so the day goes. So he says, okay, I'm taking the Hasidic one. So the angel said, okay, but I'm just curious, why did you pick the Hasidim? He said, because they never start on time. so I want to let you know that, you know, the fact that 7, 7:30, 8, 8:15, it's going to come to, you know, it's beneficial. It's beneficial.
Looks in my favor.
Okay, so here we are, and we're celebrating the Rebbe's leadership. It's also, of course, even though tonight is Yud Aleph, begins the 11th day of Shvat. Today, of course, was the Hilula, the day of celebration of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who came to the United States of America in the month of March in April 1940. He was a Rebbe already for 20 years, and he spent 10 years in America being the leader of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, and then he passed on a Saturday, on a Shabbat, the 10th day of Shvat, and 1 year later, on the 11th day of Shvat, which begins tonight, his son-in-law took over. So it's really, Yud Shvat is essentially, some would like to say it, the sun sets and the sun rises, but we don't like saying that, because in essence, the sun never sets. because a tzaddik essentially never leaves his chasidim. He never leaves the people that he loves. Especially when we talk about his son-in-law, the Rebbe, the present Rebbe. I never say the Rebbe's name with his personal name, but the Rebbe has the name of the third Rebbe of Chabad. So we're talking the third Rebbe's name was Menachem Mendel Schneerson, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So the seventh Rebbe, which we call the Rebbe, has that name. So he took over the leadership of his father-in-law. So it's always a special day that has both of these ideas together. How one tzaddik is being elevated, and through his elevation, he elevates all that are connected to him. And then another tzaddik, another leader, that actually deals with the people the way they are in their physical on earth. What does it mean, the word Hilula? The word, many of you I'm sure have heard the Yiddish word, which is when we talk about an anniversary of a death, we call it a yahrzeit. And it's not a mystical word. In Yiddish, yar means a year, sight means time, so it's the time of the year. So we delegate that, and when we say, okay, it's that time of the year when Dad passed away, or when Mom passed away, or when Zaidi passed away. So it's a yahrzeit. And how do? We go to the synagogue, we say the Kaddish, and so on. But when tzaddikim pass on, we don't call it a yahrzeit, though it can be called a yahrzeit. It's actually called Hilula. Hilula means a day of joy. And there are many possibilities of what's the literal translation of the word Hilula. The great Rabbi suggests that the word Hilula is actually in the Aramaic, which means a wedding. And in the Gemara Brachas, we have that so-and-so made Hilula levei brei or something like that. He made a wedding for his son. Which sounds very curious. Why would the day a holy person leaving the world, why is that called a wedding? So some say, because at a wedding there's great joy. And the tzaddik, paradoxically, is happy to leave. Why? So this explains the concept of a wedding. Because in a wedding, what we have essentially is a union of two entities, two creations that become as much as humanly possible one. That's a wedding. The essence of the wedding is the merging of two into one. The tzaddik loves God with a passion, but because he's on earth, as much as he loves Hashem and as he serves Hashem, there's a little bit of a distance because the physicality of the world interferes. But on the day of a tzaddik's passing, now he's able to transcend, go beyond the body. So basically, what's going to happen when he goes up to heaven with his neshama? He's going to merge with God, be embraced and enveloped with godliness. So it's actually a wedding. So on the day of a tzaddik's passing, it's called Hilula. It's a celebration of a wedding. It's a joyful day for the tzaddik, and as I'll explain, for us that are being associated with the tzaddik, as well as what's taking place in the tzaddik's psyche, so to speak, is he's getting married to Hashem in a much more profound way than he is on earth. It's very similar to me and you today, where the expression is, now we do mitzvahs as if we would be betrothed to the Almighty, but when the Mashiach will come, our mitzvahs will be done with a greater depth. We will feel a greater closeness, so we will then be able to celebrate a marriage. So why are we here, though? The reason why we're here is, and we'll talk much more about the present Rebbe, but the idea of the Hilula means that as the Rebbe becomes higher, or he elevates himself, he takes all of those that are connected to him with his elevation. there are different types of tzaddikim. We spoke about this downtown, so I don't want to repeat it for the people that were there. But there are certain tzaddikim whose path is a personal path. They're climbing a mountain. And then there are other tzaddikim where they bring people with them on the mountain. And even though they're always 100 feet ahead or 1,000 feet ahead, they always look back to make sure that no one is actually being lost. When a tzaddik of that caliber leaves this world, he doesn't leave and say, okay, I finished my job. All my life I've been taking care of God's children, and now I'm finished. On the contrary, as he gets elevated in heaven, he's actually elevating the children that he's in charge of. So it's a Yom Simcha, it's actually a day of joy to participate in a Hilula, in a celebration of a tzaddik, and especially of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was our Rebbe, and the Rebbe of Klal Yisrael. And when his neshama, so to speak, was elevated, so too we as well. I had, though, a thought that I would like to share with you about this. The idea of a wedding. When you look at a wedding, there are small weddings, and then there are Hasidic weddings, large weddings, Israeli weddings, and many types of weddings. But somehow, there seems to be, especially amongst the more traditional and observant Jews, that a wedding, you invite a lot of people. Now, there's really like an inner circle. Who's the happiest? There's the groom and the bride, the chassan and the kala, then their families, right? The mechutanim, father and mother, siblings. And then there is the close friends. And then there are the close relatives. Then there are the people that pray with the father in the shul who want to participate with that. And then there's those people that you have business acquaintances. And the circle keeps going further and further and further away until you have people showing up. They heard there's a chasana, why not? There's some music and there's some food, so why not? And of course, they're always taught to say, if the person says, "Are you related to the groom?" You say, "No, I'm from the I'm from the other side." And if they say, "You're from the," no, I'm from. And then if they both come together, you just merely mention that you happen to drop in by mistake. But I mean, everyone is there. So my question is, does everyone equally celebrate? Obviously not. The closer you are, the more meaningful the ceremony, the more meaningful the simcha, the more you enjoy it. When we talk about a hilula, a celebration of a tzaddik, a celebration of a rebbe, you could come as an intimate. You could come as a close relative. And then today was very, very important, and so was tonight. Or you might say, I'm not really a Chabadnik, but I like Chabad. So I'm friends of Chabad, and I'm too invited to the wedding. And it's meaningful. And then there's someone else that says, I'm not Chabad, but I know my friend is going, and why not spend some time with him? And so the circle extends. The bottom line is, everyone by the wedding gets fed, everyone by the wedding hears the music, everyone by the wedding can participate. It's almost a choice for the guest to decide, where do I want to be? I'm only the second cousin, but I feel like celebrating. So you push yourself into the circle and you celebrate. And sometimes the closest friend suddenly gets very shy, or he's in a bad mood, and he hangs out in the outskirts. So I'm thinking to myself, the fact that the tzaddik's yahrzeit, which we call hilula, is also a little bit of a challenge for us. Everyone, those that are here and those that didn't come, were elevated today because the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, was a Nasi. He was a prince amongst his people, and as a king, he was in charge of Klal Yisrael. So as he gets elevated in heaven, every single Jew, in fact, the expression is, even a Jew who uses his religion as a nickname. In other words, it's not really him, but he uses it. He too was elevated. But when we think about the wedding, people that are here in this room in particular, now when we came, and we sang that this is an important day. He's a great tzaddik. We want to mark this. We want to absorb this. We want to participate in his celebration. Then suddenly we become mechutanim. We become a lot closer to the Rebbe and a lot closer to this elevation. So l'chaim, everybody. Whether we feel it or not, may we use the elevation and the blessings that were given to us today to continue to grow. L'chaim l'rocha. L'chaim.
Okay, they can open it. Is there another one open? Yeah. I can pour it a little bit. Don't worry. original.
Chaim, everybody. Chaim, I'd like to spend most of the time now talking about what we could learn and what we should do. I shouldn't say what we should do. Let's just put it a little bit differently. Review some of the most important lessons that our Rabbi always taught us. Yud Shvat is a day that's celebrated by Hasidim all over. So I had the occasion to talk to my daughter in Shvat. So she says that she just heard a cute story from Rabbi Hecht. And this is what happened. He says that, I think it was Rabbi Hecht or someone else in Shvat decided that he wants to remind all the people what time is Shabbos candles. So he got himself a bullhorn, and this is Israel, and approximately 1 hour before Shabbos, he's walking the streets. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Chabad, Ma'achel, Chabad wishes you, Shabbat Shalom, Al Tishkach, don't forget, Hadlakat Nerot, you light the candles, 4:42. He's doing this for 1 hour. Even with the bullhorn, it's a little strenuous, but he does this week after week. There's a chassid from not Chabad, and he was very impressed with this rabbi. Every single week he goes for an hour talking. So he says, I'd like to help you. He says, that would be great. 2 bullhorns is going to make the people crazy, but why don't we switch? I'll go down 1 block, make the announcements, then you do the next one. So he said, fine. So this is true. The next week, he goes with this rabbi, and the rabbi begins, Shabbat Shalom, don't forget to light the candles, Chabad wishes you a happy Hanukkah. No, a good Shabbos. And then the next one, the other guy, I think he was a chassid of Ger or something like that, says the same thing, Shabbat Shalom, Chabad wishes you. And this goes on for a whole hour. It's now like a half hour before Shabbos, so they finish their rounds, and the Chabadnik thanks him. He says, I want to really thank you very much. I mean, you saved my life, you saved my voice. He says, yeah. But by the way, what time is Shabbos candles? That's a true story. For an hour, he was saying, don't forget, you got to light the candles. By the way, what time do you light the candles? I'm telling you, we're like this. The Rebbe's been talking to us for like 40, 50 years. And it's in the Chabad tradition for 200 years. And after all of that, you say, so what are we supposed to do? And the Rebbe wrote, I heard this, a beautiful sikha, and he told over a story of Talmud. The story is found 2 places, one in the Gemara B'Metzia, page 85, one in the Gemara Ketubis, page 103. Beautiful story. This is the way the story goes. There were 2 great rabbis, Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Chia. And we're talking about something that takes place approximately 16 or 1700 years ago. It's after the Mishnah, and Rabbi Chia wrote the Brisa. So he's actually one of the super great transmitters of Torah knowledge. So he had a colleague, his name was Chanina, and one time they have a discussion, and they're debating something, and Rabbi Chanina looks at his colleague, and he says, with me you're debating? I mean, you're listening to me and you're not agreeing? Do you know who I am? Of course they knew who he was. Do you know who I am? My reasoning is so powerful. My logic is so impeccable. You can't... If everyone forgot Torah, I would be able to teach them all Torah, because with my mind I could actually bring the Torah to the people. And you disagree with what I just said? And Rabbi Chia listens politely, and he says, you know who I am? And Rabbi Chia says, what about you? He says, I am a person that would never allow the Torah to be forgotten. You're talking about how you would restore the Torah, but I would never let the Torah be forgotten. And of course, how can any person make a statement like that? So he explains. He says, you know what I would do? And actually the Gemara says he did it. You know what I would do? I would go to a place where there's no Torah knowledge. And then what I would do is I would find a field and I would plant flax. When the flax grows, I would cut the flax. And then I would comb it into strands and fibers, and I would make nets, N-E-T-S, to capture animals. Then I would take these nets in the forest, and I would capture deers, live deer. And then I would bring the deer home and go to a shochet and say, I want the meat to be given out to orphans and poor people. And then I would take the leather or the hide, and I would make them into parchment. And I would make 5 sets of parchment, and I would write 5 Torahs, but not all 5 books. On one parchment I write Bereshis, the next one Shemos, the next one by Yikra, by Midma and Devarim. And then I would go and I would find 5 people, 5 children, and I would say, I want to give you a gift. Here's your book, and the second one, here's your book, and here's your book. And I would tell them that when you finish reading the book, until I come back, it might take a long time, so why don't you just exchange it with your friend? And in this way, Torah would never be forgotten. And the Gemara actually concludes, it's really more in the Medrash, Gedela Ma'aseh Chiyah, how great was the works of Chiyah. So I heard this from the Lubavitch Rabbi on one of the tapes, and he explains this, and he asks a question. Rabbi Chanina was a tremendous educator and a brilliant man, truly brilliant. He wasn't making this up. Why is Chiyah, Rabbi Chiyah's approach, better than Rabbi Chanina? It also seems to take a lot longer. Rabbi Chanina is going to go over to a person and start teaching him the Torah, but Rabbi Chiyah, before he even begins to teach him the Torah, he has to plant, he has to cut, he has to weave, he has to... A second question. Rabbi Chiyah himself was a very great Torah scholar. In order for him to do this stuff, he had to take away time from his own study and his own writing. He was an author as well, author of the Tosefta and the Brisa, and himself to go out and do all of these things. And then he added, you might think that a person like this has the whole Torah in his mind. There's no question about it that even if he was planting, he was thinking Torah. But in Jewish law, if something has a bad smell, like an outhouse or a tannery where they make leather into parchment, according to halacha, you may not study Torah because it's offensive smell. You're not letting him think Torah. So here's a man who has the weight of the Torah on his shoulders. It's his responsibility to make sure that he's learning and everyone else is learning. And he's going to have to sacrifice a certain amount of time when he's not learning at all, because he's in the factory where they're making, where they're changing. So what makes him so outstanding? The Rebbe said, what made him outstanding was he did everything. He didn't delegate. Of course, we're taught that if you want to be productive, you have to know how to delegate, and great leaders know how to delegate and everything else. But it's equally true to say that when people constantly delegate, they actually lose touch. How many times have we heard and read about a person who started from the bottom and then slowly worked himself up, and now he's like a manager or greater, and everyone is so sure that he understands them. And to their amazement, after a year or two, the guy's a big shot, he's in a different world, and he doesn't remember anymore. So delegating is important and very productive, but at many times when you delegate, you immediately take yourself out of it. Rabbi Chiyah understood that in order for Torah study not to be forgotten, it's important that the great rabbi himself be involved from the beginning to the end. And he then said it about his father-in-law. He said, my father-in-law, the previous Rabbi, was a genius in Torah. He was a Kabbalist. He taught Chassidus. And he was a passionate person. He could pray and did pray for hours. When he became Rebbe, the great Chassidim were hit over the head. You're not learning enough. You're not davening enough. He was very, very strong with them. And at the same time, he told people that your job is to take away your own study of Torah and teach the Aleph Bet, the ABC. And not only that, the people that the previous Rebbe counseled were often people that did not ask for spiritual blessings. They had trouble, this one was sick, and this one lost a job, this one had an anti-Semitic neighbor, and so on. And they came to the Rebbe, who took away his valuable time to talk to them, to advise them. Many times he actually gave them money, if he was able to. Because he was Reb Chia. He understood that the job of a Rebbe is not only to teach the top select 0.2% of Jewish people. The job of a Rebbe, certainly from the Chabad tradition, is to be a Nasi, to be not only a prince of Israel, but to be a Rebbe, Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people, and the head of the Jewish people has to feel each and every one. So what I told you is really a sikha from the Rebbe. I want to add something of my own, if I'm allowed, and then tell you a beautiful story which I believe could connect to the whole thing. And that is, when you look at the commentators say that the reason why Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Chia was chosen to be superior was because Rabbi Hanina said, I could return the Torah were it to be forgotten. Rabbi Chia said, I'll make sure that it's never forgotten. So what we have over here is, one had the potential. He said, don't worry, I have the potential to fix in case something's broken. And the other one said, I'm doing it. So it's koyach, power, in contrast to potential. Okay. I was thinking to myself that in many ways, the Rebbe said this about the previous Rebbe, and his message was that the previous Rebbe did everything himself. He didn't delegate, he was involved in every single aspect of Jewish education. But it occurred to me, maybe the Rebbe was hinting to something else as well. Those of you that might know something of American history in terms of Judaism, I know everyone knows American history in terms of George Washington, the Civil War, and so on, but Jewish history is an amazing field. And those of you that might know a little bit of it know that in the 1950s, after the war, there was a select group of refugees who came from the other world, the old world, and these were heroes. They were all courageous, and they said, we're going to help make sure that the Torah is not forgotten in America. What did they do? They went to Lakewood, New Jersey. They went to New Square. They went to Jersey City. They picked small places, and they said, we're going to start studying Torah just like the Altaim, just like the old one, and we're going to develop great Torah teachers. In case Torah will be forgotten, we'll have the reservoir. It's almost as if to say, we're going to create a university that has a lot of PhDs and MAs, and then in case the country needs it, we have the reservoir. And these people spoke about the potential. The previous Rebbe said, now is not the time to build a ghetto. Now is not the time to make a university when we don't have elementary school. So therefore what he did was he started a yeshiva, and as soon as the yeshiva, he only had 10 students in the beginning, and then 15, and then 20, small, started very small. As soon as they were capable, he sent them away. And he said, you go to Dorchester, you go to Connecticut, and you go here, open up a yeshiva. Where are we going to get the students? Go from house to house. There was no potential, there was practical. He was building Judaism on a day-to-day basis. It's interesting that when you take a look, again, at least history is his story. So the way I read the story, the way I read history, you could see how not only powerful was the previous Rebbe's approach, and of course the Rebbe's approach, but how true. Because now today, some 60 years later, what do we have? We have some places, Baltimore and Lakewood, New Jersey, and upstate New York, and I don't know, maybe you know other places which I don't know of, that are great Torah centers, and as soon as you go 2 miles away, there are people whose name are Goldstein and Springer, and they know nothing about Yom Kippur, much less about Torah. And here they're developing this potential of great Torah scholars. Every one of them is a rabbi. And what's happening with the Aleph base? What's happening with the college kid? What's happening with the person who doesn't understand why he can't marry out of the faith? What's so terrible? We're all good. That's the vision of the Rebbe, of the Rebbes, of the previous Rebbe and of the Rebbe, to be like a Reb Chia, not to allow Torah to be v'kabel. There's a very, very charming and beautiful story about the third Rebbe of Chabad. The story goes that he was in Lubavitch. Lubavitch is what, Belarus or White Russia? And is that the same thing, Belarus, White Russia? Yeah. Okay. It was in Lubavitch. And the Hasidim did everything possible to try to be in the presence of their Rebbe for the high holidays. And if they were able to stay there for Sukkot, which is a Freiliche day, a day of great rejoicing, they did so. So there was a Chassid who there was a lot of loose ends that he had to take care of. He had to take care of the business, and he had to make sure someone was going to milk the cows. It wasn't easy. And he finally was able to put the whole thing together. He got permission from his wife, which was not easy, because there was a big household. And he was going to go to the Rebbe for Yom Kippur and Sukkot. And she was going to hold the fort, and they would share the reward of going to the Rebbe, because there's an equal partnership in the Chasidus in terms of the Rebbe. There's no such thing as a Chassid without a Chasidus there. I mean, you need both together. So he was very excited. The day after Rosh Hashanah, he travels to Lubavitch. He meets his friends. There's Farbrengens and embraces. Everything is beautiful. And the highlight is, he thinks that sometime after the holidays, he'll get a chance to talk to the Rebbe face to face. To his utter amazement, after 24 hours, he's in the shul, and the shamash comes out and says, "Is there a label from this and this village?" And he says, yeah, I'm labeled. The Rebbe wants to see you. He almost had a heart attack. The Rebbe wants to see me. I have to prepare myself. I got to daven and learn and fast. You sure? The Rebbe specified you. He was really frightened. What's going on? Before Yom Kippur, puts on his gartel, he goes into the Rebbe, and he doesn't know what to expect. The Rebbe looks at him, and he says, "You're from this and this village. Have you ever heard of so-and-so?" He said, "Rebbe, yeah. He's a aristocrat. He basically owns many, many acres of land, and he's a well-known anti-Semite. So we all try very much not to be known by him. But he's already living there for years, and sure, I know, I've heard of him." Said the Rebbe, "Good. I want you to go and deliver a message to him." Looks at the Rebbe, a message to that guy? The anti-Semite, the bum, the no goodnik? Yeah. So he said, "Rebbe, he's very cruel. He has dogs, and he has a revolver, and you don't just go see him. You have to make an appointment. And he doesn't like Jewish people. And if I just barge in, I'm a dead man." So the Rebbe said, "You didn't even ask me what you should tell him." So he says, "Well, come to think of it, before I die, what should I tell him?" He says, "You should tell him it's time for him to do teshuvah." So he's thinking to himself, that's interesting, this well-known anti-Semite is a Jew. So he's now thinking to himself, he won't get a bullet. Instead, he'll be boiled in oil. This guy, who's a real Russia, he's not married into the faith, and he's a real big person spiritually and morally, and I'm going to... So he looks at the Rebbe and says, "Rebbe, I'm frightened, I won't be able to say the words." So the Rebbe said, "Okay, if you're frightened, I'll help you." And he said, "I'm going to teach you something. There's one of the mystical names, I don't know if it's of God or of an angel, but there's a mystical name which I want you to concentrate on when you get there." And it could be that he even gave him a paper that had one or two of the signs. And before you enter, you are to think about the name, and that name will make it that no one will start up with you. So you'll be able to go to him and make sure that you tell him what he's supposed to do. So he said, but Rebbe, I want to stay with you for the holidays. If you're sending me now, that means that I won't be here. And the Rebbe said, you're my shaliach. He left the room and he was very, very sad. He was very sad because he thought that the Rebbe wanted to get rid of him. So the Rebbe sent him on a mission. But what he wanted was to connect to the Rebbe and the Hasidim and the holiday. And when the Hasidim saw him so down, they said, you just saw the Rebbe. Most people come out dancing. He said, the Rebbe doesn't like me. And then when they heard what the Rebbe had told them to do, they said, fool, what an honor. The Rebbe is using you as an extension. Go. And they made him feel good. So he finally, the next day, it's now 2 days before Yom Kippur or something like that, he takes a horse and a wagon, he gets to one place, he has to maybe take a train to somewhere else, and he comes to him literally the morning of Erev Yom Kippur. And it's a beautiful house, and everything that I said was true. There were dogs, there were soldiers, there's a lot of trepidation. And as he's coming closer to the gate, he takes out the paper and he reminds himself what he's supposed to be thinking about. And as he walks in, he has that name of God pictured in his mind. And as he walks through, no one challenges him. And it's amazing, because there are guards all over the place, there are servants all over the place, and this guy is very clearly Hasidic Jew, and he's just walking in, and he even says to someone, so where's the master? He's upstairs in his den. Second floor, knocks on the door, doesn't wait for an answer, just walks in, and the guy looks at him, and his eyes are like murderous, and the guy says, don't get angry with me, listen first. I come from the Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, and he told me to tell you it's time to do teshuvah. Hello. And he walks out, and he's expecting to hear, on the thing. He's expecting swords, but he keeps on thinking. When he gets out, in his confusion, he wants to take one last look at the paper. When it comes, it blows away the paper. By the time he comes home, he can't remember anything. Okay. He had a very interesting Yom Kippur. He had a very interesting holiday. And he began to ask, what happened to that guy? And he heard a strange report that somewhere Yom Kippur time, the day after, the man basically called in his servants, and he said, prepare for me my valise, I'm going on a journey. He didn't say where he's going, and he didn't say when he's returning. So right now, the vice manager is running the estate, and no one has any idea of where he is. There was only one person who had an idea where he was, and that was this chassid. He says to his wife, I got to go back. We made up, I was going to be there for the holiday, I didn't make it, but I have to go back, I have to hear what happened. Anyway, he goes back to Lubavitch, and when he comes back to Lubavitch, it's after the holidays, and the first thing he wants to hear is what did the Rabbi teach, and how. So for 2 days, he's just absorbing what happened. And then he finally asked, did anyone from this and this place come? And they said, as a matter of fact, the day before Sukkot, a very well-dressed man came, and he told the Shamash he wants to see the Rebbe. The Shamash said the Rebbe doesn't see anyone. He said, just tell him my name, and if he says no, it's no. The Rebbe said, come in, spoke to him, and he disappeared. When they told him that, he says, you know who he was? He told over the whole story. When he told over the whole story, they were amazed. A miracle! But guess what? They got very upset. They got very upset with this miracle. And they made a delegation to the Rebbe. And they knocked on the door, and they said, Rebbe, you always say that you don't make miracles. This man you sent into the den of lions. He took a person who for 60 or 70 years had no connection to Judaism. all he had to hear was that your name was uttered, and that motivated him to leave, to come to Lubavitch, to become a Baal Tshuva. What about us? We study, we learn, we keep Shabbos, we study, you talk, and we haven't changed. How come this guy you saved, and us you're playing with? We can say playing with, but like us, you're just... So he said, I'll tell you. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu was a shepherd. So we have to learn leadership from a shepherd. What does a shepherd do? A shepherd takes out a flock of sheep. So let's say he has 75 sheep. Well, he can't take care of each and every one. So what he does is he leads them out, and he brings them to a place where they're going to pasture, and then he brings them back. And what does he do? From the distance, he observes them. What happens if he's walking to the meadow, and one of the sheep starts wandering away? So what does he do? He shouts. He says, "Shepsel, get back!" And then just when the sheep hears the sound of the shepherd, he goes back. So what happens if he goes a little bit further and he doesn't hear me, the shepherd? So then the shepherd takes a pebble, throws it, and it touches the sheep, and the sheep goes, "Meh!" And the shepherd says, "Don't get angry with me, join the flock." But what happens if the sheep disappears? So now the shepherd has to go look for it. And he finds that the sheep fell into a pit. And he shouts at the sheep, "No, get out!" But the sheep is stuck. So here the shepherd has to lower himself into the pit to take out the sheep. He said, "You Hasidim, my job is to make sure you get to where you have to go. I don't have to touch each and every one of you. I don't have to shout at each and every one of you." But this guy, his neshama was so lost. He's like that sheep that's in a pit. And even if I would shout at him, I would teach him, he would listen. To him, I literally had to go into the pit and take him out. Gedayla Maisa Chia, to a great extent, was, Chia said, I can't allow for a time where Jewish people, Jewish children won't have Torah, and then they're going to be rescued. No. I myself, I'm going to make sure that I meet the kid who doesn't know anything. I'm going to give him the book. I'm going to show him what the book is, and I'm going to tell him, not only do I expect you to know the book, I want you to share that book with others. And that really encapsulates the Rebbe's message in terms of outreach. He said this so many times, and it's been repeated. There was a university student from France who was, I don't know which year he was in his studies, but he became a Baal Teshuvah, and he met the Rabbi. And the Rabbi was very excited about seeing him. And he said to the Rabbi, "I'm willing to leave my studies. I'll go to yeshiva. I'll become a Talmid Chacham." And the Rebbe said, "No, that's not your job. You're a student and you already have gone through so much study. You should finish your degree." So he said, "Rebbe, but what am I going to do in college in terms of Judaism?" He says, "What do you mean? You'll be a teacher." He said, "How can I be a teacher? I never went to yeshiva." So the Rebbe said, "What do you know?" He said, "I'm just learning how to read the Siddur." He said, "It's fine. That's what you'll teach." It's not a joke. I mean, that's how you have some Jewish knowledge. You know what an aleph is. You teach an aleph. You know how to light the candles on Hanukkah. That's what you teach. Whatever you're capable, that's what you teach. When a person does that, they become immeasurably enriched by themselves. L'chaim, everybody. So what time is candlelight? L'chaim, everybody. We should hear the message, absorb the message, and act on the message. L'chaim, No, what's your favorite tune? One minute. No? Completely blank? No. So which one do you like?
Drink more.
Which one do you like?
No.
What's your favorite
No, Joe. I'm comparing?
Okay. Dai dai la kula gasha samiya gasha samiya gasha samiya la 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 gasha samiya
Ты стираешь, да?
L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim,
Да, потом еще проще. Прямо есть аппликация, ты можешь прямо на этот.
You know, today with the internet,
Send it.
you can do a Google search if you're looking up a
Dropbox.
subject. If you, I'm not talking to the IT guys. I mean, this is something I don't know about, but I know something called a tag.
Что такое Dropbox?
Well, basically, it's one thing, and then it says tags, so it could go under a lot of other categories. So basically, if I ask you, Yud Shvat Farbrengen, what would be a tag? It could be Yud Shvat, it could be Rabbi, it could be Farbrengen, it could be Hasidim, it could be Lubavitch, it could be eating, it could be camaraderie. I mean, there's many ideas together in every Farbrengen, and certainly a Farbrengen of Yud Shvat. The most obvious thing of Yud Shvat is to talk about the Rebbe and talk about his kashrus being connected to the Rebbe. So I'm going to share with you the way something personal, what it means to me. And I assume that the way I feel is not that unusual. And perhaps if you hear the way I feel, maybe you would see yourself somewhere along that line. I want to point out an interesting thing. By us, when we want to imagine a place of perfection, we have a place for it. It's called Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Of course, when a person dies, he's going to go to paradise, Gan Eden. But already in the Chumash, we're taught that there was a place of unparalleled beauty. I mean, we can't even imagine it. No smog, no graffiti. No, I mean, everything was perfect. Every butterfly was perfect. The sky was perfect. The trees were beautiful. The two specimens were the most handsome and the most beautiful. I mean, there wasn't anything that was lacking in this garden. Except for one thing. You would think that if you're living in paradise, you should be the happiest person alive. But the Torah says very clearly that it is not good for man to be alone, which essentially means that Adam HaRishon, primordial man, or the first man, was lonely. Loneliness is an incredible concept because it's really irrational. You know, there's what we call physical needs: eating, drinking, sleeping, shelter. But if a person has everything they need, or even everything they want, they even have entertainment, but they don't have human interaction, they suffer greatly. And that is why one of the most severe punishments you could give a prisoner is solitary. It's not that he eats less necessarily, and sometimes they even allow books. It's not that he's, it depends where it is, but the punishment of solitary is not in what he's not receiving in terms of food, drink, or shelter. It is in terms of human interaction. Even when the guard gives him the food, it's not direct. They'll put it into a little cubicle, they'll shove it, and that makes a person crazy. I need to talk to a person. I need to interact with a person. And the fancy word is, it's an existential concept. Man was not meant to be alone. Because only Hashem could be alone, because Hashem is self-contained, Hashem is perfect. And I don't know if this is blasphemous, so I'll say it with half in joke, and even Hashem gets lonely, and that's why He created man. But the bottom line is, other than God Almighty Himself, everything needs something, and certainly a human being needs another human being. There's a beautiful statement from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, which the Rebbe put into his famous Hayom Yom. And that is, one of the greatest accomplishments of Chasidus. And what he writes over there is like this: until Chasidus, there were great rabbis and heads of academies, of Talmud and so on. They're called Rosh HaYeshiva, the head of the yeshiva. But they were lonely. They were lonely, their students were lonely. But Chasidus came and created a Rebbe and Chasidim. A Rebbe is never lonely because he has the Chasidim, and more importantly, the Chasidim are never lonely because they have a Rebbe. It's a magnificent thought. And I wish I could say I understood it fully, because it seems to me that this is when he talks about one of the accomplishments of Chasidus, we're talking about a fundamental. But let me tell you how I broke it down for myself. I was trying to think of how do you define being lonely, / what's so terrible about being alone? And there have been many, many studies that have shown that a person could be in a crowd and still feel lonely. Anyone could attest to going to a party, there's loud music and you're bumping into people and you feel like you don't belong there, you feel like you're lonely. You can't wait to leave. It's not that you're not with people, you can even talk to a person. You can even fabricate, where's the men's room? You just want to talk to someone. And after all of that, you're still lonely. So what perhaps, again, I'm not speaking as a professional mental, I'm just talking from my own background, so to speak. It seems to me that the essence of loneliness means that what I'm feeling cannot be shared with anyone else. It's not I need a person next to me. Rather, I need someone who I could share and relate to in terms of feeling. It's interesting. I heard this from my first cousin, Hecht. He writes that this is when he was youngish. So he had both parents alive, and one of the people in the shul lost a father. So he was going to do what they call in English a shiva call. He has to come and console, and he just somehow did not feel comfortable going alone. So he called up an older rabbi, a colleague, actually called up Rabbi Yuval Krensky, and he said, could you do me a favor? We both know this gentleman, let's go together. He said, okay. They come into the house, there's plenty of people. The man is, a very well-respected member of the community, and he's sitting on the chair, the tradition. And when Shia came in, he's the rabbi of the synagogue, so they pushed him up, and he comes with Rabbi Krinsky. And he's sitting over there, and he realizes he has nothing what to say. You're supposed to say something wise, something profound, something, and he goes, he tried to say something, and the guy was listening politely, but he could see him, he was spaced out. And then Rabbi Krinsky on his own says to the guy, he said, how old are you? He said, I'm 46. He said, I lost my father when I was in my 40s. And suddenly the ice was broken, and he was able to talk. Now, what was so profound about this? He came prepared with jokes, with stories, with inspiration, with Torah. He couldn't get through. Why? So I'll tell you why, the way I understand it. He's sitting over there, he's looking at Shia, and he says, you don't understand what I'm feeling. So don't tell me Torah. That's very nice, and don't tell me what I should be feeling. When you don't feel what I'm feeling, how could you tell me what to feel? But suddenly comes a stranger, didn't even know you, Krinsky, not well, just knew my name. And suddenly he says, I lost my father. Suddenly, so you understand. You know what it means. Yeah, the confusion, the bewilderment, and the anger, the upsetness. And now the empathy created a bond. And he wasn't lonely anymore. He was not alone. Until the Hasidic movement, there were always, until today, but certainly there have always been great Torah scholars. And there have always been students. And they were both lonely. Why? Because the Torah scholar looked at his student as a student of Torah and basically thought to himself, this guy, my student, has no idea of what I'm feeling. How could he? He's not a Torah scholar. He's not on my caliber. And the student really felt terrible. He said, I'm listening to this great rabbi expound. Does he know who he's talking to? If he would really know what I'm thinking, if he really knew what I was doing, he wouldn't talk to me. So you have these two, a receiver and a giver. Mashbiah and a makabo. There's no real connection. It's rather an empty cup, and you put something in the empty cup. but there's no relationship between the bottle and the empty cup because I could fill this empty cup with sand and not water. Until came the Baal Shem Tov, and this continued through all of the Rebbes. And that is, the Rebbe says to the Chassid, as much as you need me, I need you. Because my job is to take care of Klal Yisrael. You are a member of Klal Yisrael, and if I can't get to you, then I'm not complete myself. The Chassid says to the Rebbe, you're such a holy man. You're like Moses on the mountain. Do you really understand what it means to have a cow in a village that doesn't give milk? I mean, could you relate to that? Well, the Talmud Chacham couldn't, but the Rebbe did. And since of all the Rebbes, and we're in this generation, which is the Rebbe's generation, which is either the 7th, the 8th, or the 9th generation, depending on how you want to count it, we're not lonely. Because each and every one of us in this room and of those that are outside of the room has a Rebbe that cares about them, cared about them, and more importantly, was with them constantly. In the Holy Tanya, those of you that read the introduction, the Tanya writes like this. Why am I writing this book? There are so many great books out there, holy books. One of the things that the Tanya writes is, but they're so holy, they don't talk to all people. They can only touch a certain group of people. But the Tanya writes, I know you guys. That's what he says, I know you. You used to come and tell me your problems. You told me your struggles. This book is for you. Because essentially, I know you intimately. I know you personally, and I feel for you. And the Tanya, which is such a holy book of Hasidus, till today, there were Hasidim that used to say, you know what, I'm going to have a conversation with the Alter Rebbe. How could you converse with a Rebbe who's already almost 300 years in heaven? You study the Tanya, you're having a conversation with the Alter Rebbe. You're saying to the Alter Rebbe, you know, I got a real strong animal. And I'm in the middle of davening and I can't daven. And he says, okay, I hear your pain. I want to let you know that I have advice for you. And then you talk to the Alter Rebbe. It didn't work. And he says, yeah, okay, well, you should know that your destiny is to struggle. Well, I don't want to struggle. I want to be a tzaddik. No, you can't be a tzaddik. I mean, it's amazing. If you really wanted to think of the Tanya as a conversation, you could actually see a weave back and forth. The Rebbe's talking to you. This is not even 100th of the Jewish library. Maybe 1,000th of the Jewish. I don't know. There are tens of thousands. And there's so much profound wisdom written and printed. And I have to tell you, as a chassid, and as I'm not lying, no one talks to me the way the Rebbe talks to me. I could open up, whether it be Rashi, which is of course the classic, or a later commentator, and then I open up the Rebbe's thought of the Parsha. And I say, man, he's talking to me. He understands me. He knows where I'm coming from. He knows where I'm falling, I'm failing. And the Rebbe is encouraging me to live. And to live as a chassid. And to live as a person that's serving Hashem. If we're talking about what is the Rebbe for us here, I can't speak for all of you. I could merely say partially the way I feel and what I've read. You know, there's a very well-known story. It's on, what makes it well-known? It's on Chabad.org. Okay, it's a very well-known story. And over there, there was a man. The Rabbi had many admirers. Really, till today, you find people that you never imagined having had a connection with the Rebbe, and they tell you their father, their mother, themselves, and it's amazing. The Rebbe had a connection with a wealthy philanthropist who was not very religious, but had a great Jewish heart, and loved the Rebbe like a son loves a father, basically. He admired the Rebbe, and they had an extensive correspondence. The Rebbe had a great sense of humor, by the way. Besides being the holy of holies, he had a wonderful sense of humor. And he would write him with humor at times, and it was amazing, the closeness. And he would see the Rebbe often. When I say often, he didn't have to go through all of the channels. There were times when he could call up and they would smuggle him in, basically. And one time he had a beautiful yechidus, a very, very personal, one-to-one audience. And the Rebbe took an interest in his business and his family and gave him advice, and they joked, as if to say, together. And the guy was in such an uplifted mood, and he had such love to the Rebbe, he couldn't resist. And he said, Rebbe, we share something extraordinary. There's a bond between us. I feel it. The Rebbe, nodded. And he says, but I'm looking for a word. Rebbe, how would you best characterize our relationship? And he meant it seriously. He really wanted to know. So the Rebbe thought for a moment, and he said, I'm a good friend of yours. And the guy wanted to shrivel up into nothing. A good friend? We know each other for years. You know me better than anyone else. You know how much I would give my fortune for you, my life for you. All we are is good friends? Well, he didn't articulate it, but it was written on his face. So the Rebbe then said, I see you're not that happy with that description. He said, do you have friends? He said, Rebbe, I happen to have a lot of friends. He said, do you have good friends? He said, yes, I believe I have good friends, and that's why I'm so surprised that me and you are merely good friends. So the Rebbe said, let me define to you what I define as a good friend. A good friend is someone you could talk to, you could share, you could disclose your most intimate details, no matter how unsavory they might be, and your good friend who listens and advises will not change his opinion of you at all. You could say the worst thing or the biggest mistake that you've done, and your best friend, or let me say best friend, your good friend will still have that same affection, that same love, and that same respect. How many good friends do you have? He understood. Good friends, people are good friends until you're convicted. And then suddenly, I never knew he was a convicted so-and-so, I knew him, but I had no idea. Well, would you consider him being a friend? No, I'm not his friend. I have nothing to do with a guy like that. Think about your friends and then your good friends. How many good friends would accept you with the same love, affection, and devotion if they knew who you really were? Or to put it a little bit differently, if something changed in your own psyche and you turned out to be whatever, would they still love you the same? The Rebbe said, I am a good friend. And he began to appreciate and realize what that means. The Rebbe is a Rebbe. I can't define a Rebbe other than he's a gift from God to the Jewish people. But what I could say, after 20 years where we yearn to see him, the Rebbe is a friend of ours. None of us are alone. Because it's very lonely struggling to do what's right. And we all at times know what's right, but it's just hard to implement it. And we're not consistent. Today I went to the meeting, I put on tefillin, and God forbid it might not be next there. Today I was in a great mood and I never got angry and I was smiling at everyone, and tomorrow might be very different. And we feel unworthy. We know we're inconsistent, and it hurts us. And you say, open up a holy book and read it. And you read, he who gets angry, it's as if he's worshiping idols. He who throws something, will go to hell. And you close the book and you kiss it. Oh, you're such a holy book. I feel terrible. What it said is true, and it's supposed to motivate you. But I don't think that tzaddik understands me. He doesn't understand my stresses, he doesn't understand my short temper, and he doesn't understand my boss. If he would meet my boss, he wouldn't have said that. You understand? There are books and books, they're all holy, they're all true, they're all real, they're all genuine, but I'm lonely, it doesn't talk to me. But we have Chassidus in general. Chassidus is the type of a teaching that actually touches your neshama deep. It reminds you constantly about how special you are. And again, this isn't the Hayom Yom. It's an amazing book. What is Chassidus? It is a study that shows man how small he is and how great he could become. Chassidus doesn't just pander and say, you're a tzaddik, you're a sweetheart, don't worry. It actually, you think you're good, it really shows you how low you are, but it never leaves you in the mud. It picks you up right away. And actually, the downward momentum somehow gets transferred into a velocity going up. If you listen to the sichos from the Rabbi, if you see it like Living Torah, if you read the beautiful stuff that they give from the Rabbi, every word was written for me, tailor-made. Which you don't see that by other leaders. Because there's only one Rebbe that we have. Tonight, we celebrate that he became our Rebbe. Tonight we celebrate that Chabad Lubavitch lives. And if Chabad Lubavitch lives, it's because the Rebbe's living. However you want to interpret that, I don't want to fight with my son-in-law over here, but however you want to interpret that, the Rebbe is very much alive. As a matter of fact, I'll end off, not the Farbrengen, but this segment with a very interesting story. There was a great rabbi in Europe in the mid-1800s, great Torah scholar, and a lot of cities wanted him to be their rabbi. It was like an honor. Such a great Torah scholar would bring prestige to the city. One day he gets a delegation from a large city, which he had not heard of before, and they say, Rabbi, we'd like you to join our city. We have a salary for you and very much honor, and it would be great. So he says, I've had many offers. What are you offering me that other cities don't? He said, our city is very, very special. Some of the greatest holy scholars are buried in our city. He said, wow, this must be a city that had, if the greatest Torah scholars are buried there, that must mean that there was once, I'm coming. Comes into the city, gets a beautiful reception. He's sitting in his room. No one's learning. No one asks him any question. By the way, this is a different story. I got to tell you, there was one rabbi who basically he went to a town. He was a big Torah scholar, and they offered him a very nice contract. Okay. Anyway, he's there for 6 months, and he says, "I'd like to leave. I'd like to break the contract. I'd like to leave." So they say, "Why?" He said, because that's the first question you asked me in 6 months. I'm a rabbi. You're supposed to ask me questions, and I'm supposed to answer you. No one has asked me one question until I say I'm leaving. You say, why? That's the whole... All right, but anyway, going back to the story, so what happens is he goes to this town. Nothing. There's no one is learning. No one is studying. Everyone's involved in business. So he calls over the committee, and he says, I tell a lie. You told me some of the greatest rabbis are buried in the city. I visited the graveyard. There's nothing there. He says, Rabbi, believe me, the rabbis are buried in this city. If you go to another city, they study the Talmud as if it's happening in front of them. So what did Abaya say? No, you're wrong. You can't say that, Rabbi said. You got to hear the names. The names of the rabbis, the names of their books, they're alive. Unfortunately, in our city, they're all buried. And they never heard of this. He's buried. He's buried. Why did I bring in the story? Can you tell me? No, that's not the reason why.
The Rebbe is alive in some way.
Oh, so I wanted to say. Oh, that's what I want to say. The Rebbe is very, very much alive. Very, very much alive. By people talking, people acting, people emulating. The Rebbe is very much alive. I don't know if I should say this, so you could mentally go off for just maybe 90 seconds. We're privileged to host a family from Israel. They're here for some medical stuff. And this family are Gera Hasidim. They live in Ashdod. I don't know if you know about the dynasty, but the Gera dynasty. with conversation, I find out that essentially it's a sect, it's a Hasidic movement, but the Rebbe, they hardly see the Rebbe. He doesn't do a tish. They don't really study the books of Ger. And when I asked them, so okay, you're a Hasidic group, so what do you do uniquely to your group? He said, actually, nothing. We're like all the other Hasidic groups. So I'm thinking to myself, what makes this dynasty a dynasty? The answer is, 175 years ago, they had a holy tzaddik, a great leader, who had a grandson who was a great tzaddik and a great leader, who had a son who was a great tzaddik and a great leader, and somewhere along the line, that's where it ends. So we're descendants of this greatness, but what's alive? Alive is when you talk about something, when you imitate something, when you practice something. There hasn't been a Rebbe in existence that is more alive than the Lubavitcher Rebbe. In every Chabad house, not only is there a picture, and not only in Chabad houses, but in hundreds of thousands of homes all over the world, there's pictures of Chabad. But the Rebbe's philosophy, the Rebbe's thoughts, is all over the place. And it's important for Hasidim to actually mention it, not only to give over a nice thought, but to say, I read from the Rebbe, I heard from the Rebbe, because that's where it's coming from. So today is a very, very special day because we could actually connect and acknowledge this greatness. We are not lonely because we have a Rebbe. And we have someone that really understands us. Chaim. Dai 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 dam bam bam dai dam dai 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 la dam bing bam dai dam dai dai dam bam 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 dai dai dam dai dam bam 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 Chaim stay Chaim
I don't know.
Bam 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 dai 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 dam bam 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 dai dam bam Dum bum 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 dum bum make sure that nothing has a
And he might start talking, you won't like what he says.
Bye. it's always good to tell when we're going to end. So hopefully by 10 we'll be finished, at least the formal part of the Farbrengen, so I don't want anyone to get too concerned. I'm not that drunk. You see, it's a little bit after 9. It's okay. But the next, I want to share with you something which is, which when you talk about the Rabbi, and today Chabad Lubavitch, and I see it all as one. The Rabbi, Chabad Lubavitch. You can't separate it, and I'm talking about the idea of Mashiach. It became almost inseparable that the message of this Rebbe, of this teacher of the 20th and 21st century, his message was that we're living at a time when the Mashiach should appear, can appear, will appear, and to a great extent, it's up to us to accelerate the process. They say there was a guy who went to a psychiatrist, and he was really what they call messed up. So the guy's taking inventory, writing all of his problems, and finally the therapist says, you have some very significant issues you're dealing with. Tell me, is there anyone in your family that suffers from mental illness? He says, suffers? They love it. I got to tell you, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, we would never say this, but the Rebbe said it on himself. He said, they say about me that I'm crazy about Mashiach. Remember that? It's famous, he said that. They say about me that I'm crazy about Mashiach. And I am. He was crazy about Mashiach. Well, if we're Hasidim, we have to be crazy about Mashiach. But before you go crazy about Mashiach, can anyone over here define craziness? It's an amazing thing. I don't know of any human being that was brought up by parents that were not told, at least once in a lifetime, stop acting crazy. All our life we're told, don't be crazy. Don't act crazy. That is the craziest idea I've ever heard. Can anyone really define what is the definition of crazy? That everyone is so sure that you should not act crazy, you should not be crazy, and that idea is preposterous, it's crazy. Well, I'm not going to speak as a medical professional. We could just speculate out loud. Craziness, I saw this in Twersky's book. He said, craziness can be defined with a very simple definition. It's defined by the number 1. If you're the only one that's doing it, you're crazy. If you're the only one that's thinking about it, you're crazy. If you're the only one that's acting in this, you're crazy. 2 people? Probably crazy. 3 people? Probably crazy. 4 people? We have to investigate. 5 people? We're talking already a trend. It's a trend. These are trendsetters. These are revolutionaries. These are great people. They're not crazy. They're ahead of the pack. I gave a class downtown, so I was walking on Grand Street, and I saw in front of my own eyes, I was kidding with them, 2 people in front of their store. I know them both. That on Grand Street, as soon as you get before Sabra, they're standing in front of the store, and they were looking somewhere. So as a joke, I went over to them and I started looking, and sure enough, people I could see, not 1,000, but I could see like.
What were looking at?
Yeah, what are you looking at? Crazy is one. I see an angel. Meshugana.
One of those.
You see the angel? What? No. Look! It's to the side. Comes a third person. Yeah, there's something there, but I'm not sure if it's there. But I'm telling you, it becomes a mother. So craziness basically means standing out, doing something that's not the usual. The Kotzker Rebbe was one of these great Hasidic masters, but he was known to be, you would call him eccentric, but he was known to be very, very fierce, quick in his thinking and brutal in his honesty. And they once said, why can't you be a little bit more in the middle of the road? And he said, why don't you go down the street? You know who walks in the middle of the road? The horses who walk in the middle of the road. The people who walk on either side.
Fire trucks.
You know what I'm saying? What do you mean? Why don't I walk in the middle? A fire gate in the middle. You understand? So, what does it mean to be crazy? To be crazy basically at times means to stand out. Every one of us that's Lubavitch has learned a mimer from the previous Rebbe, and it's an incredible mimer, because there's an entire paragraph that tells you it's a great mitzvah to be crazy. I mean, could you imagine? The rabbis of old are telling you, you should be meshuggah, you should be crazy. What does it mean to be crazy? So they give an example. The example is that there was a very, very great and holy rabbi, came to a wedding, and he was capable of juggling. And what he did was he began to juggle to make people smile and to bring joy to the groom and the bride. And he had 3 myrtle branches. And someone said, "Rabbi, it's not dignified. Rabbi, what are you doing? Showing up was big enough already. They're so proud that you showed up. You got to do this?" He didn't pay any attention because he saw the response. They were happy and enjoying it. And of course, when it says the Gemara concludes, when the time for him to leave this world came, when they were carrying out the body, a heavenly fire came, and they saw it in the shape of a myrtle. And they said, his foolishness came back. In other words, the foolishness that he acted foolishly / crazily actually was something of immense greatness. What does it mean that the Rebbe said, I'm crazy about Mashiach? Well, I want to ask you a simple question, and I'll give the answer. I always do that. It's not fair, really. But that's, the question is...
But we give the question, you give the...
Afterwards.
After 10.
And the question is, really, what is the difference between Golus and Gula? What is the difference between exile and the days of Mashiach? Of the many possible answers, the Rebbe gave a very beautiful one-liner. He said, look the way in the Hebrew word, look at the word Gola, which means exile, and look at the word Geula, which means redemption. It's the same 4 letters in both words. The difference is redemption has a 5th letter, which is the letter Aleph. You all know Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet, and in our tradition, very often when you see an Aleph, it reminds you one God, or Aluf Shalom. So the difference between Golus and Geula is an Aleph. You have to, that doesn't have to be a change. The houses could stay the same, and the crops could stay the same, and the people could so to speak, stay the same. What will change is that there will be the presence of God. That's Geula. That's redemption. That is what Mashiach will do. What did the Rebbe mean when he said that I'm crazy about Mashiach? I'll tell you what, again, what I think he might have meant. I can't say this is what I think he might have meant. The Rebbe said, I cannot tolerate a world where God is hidden. It's just not right to live in a world where God is here, but no one acknowledges him. I want a world where people could see, feel, and absorb the presence of God. I don't want a world where people say things, they talk about how religious they are, they talk about how much they believe in God, but they're concerned when the stock market takes a dive. Hey, you believe in God, what are you worried about? They lose the equilibrium about everything. About everything. What happened? I'll never forget, I remember years ago, when we came back from Simchas Torah, the Rebbe always wanted that the people should dance in shuls. So I'll never forget, we were walking on Flatbush Avenue. It must have been around 1:30 in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not a very good neighborhood. And we were running back to 770. No, it couldn't have been 1:30. It must have been 12:30 because we got there by 1. Anyway, I'm walking with my brother Sruli,
And there was a small group, only 6, 7 of us. And as we're walking, it's dark, it's black in every respect. And as we're walking, suddenly there's the bark of a dog. And we were walking, and it was a quiet street. The dog barked, and I must have jumped at least 6, 7 inches off the ground. I literally jumped. I went like this, It took a couple of good seconds for me to and I forget who it was, but the guy that was walking with me said, you didn't daven tonight. I said, what are you talking about? I danced and I davened. He says, no, you didn't. At the end of davening was Altira me pachapis. That means do not be frightened of a sudden fear. And you sang it, and it meant nothing to you. It was a dog barking behind a fence, and I was woo. It was instinctive. By the way, talking about the Altira, I just reminded myself of something. Tversky tells a story about the locomotive, that people who never saw a locomotive refuse to believe that it's possible to move wagons without a horse. So there was a small village, and a guy comes to the village and he says, I come from some Bialystok or whatever, I come from this big place, and it's amazing. I saw a horseless carriage. There was 2 carriages, there were people there, and it was moving. Not one horse. They're looking, yeah, sure, yeah. How did it move? He said, I'm not really sure, but it was making a lot of noise, and there was smoke coming out, and there was a fire. You gotta be kidding. Fire moves a carriage? I swear to you, I saw it with my own eyes. Yeah, you don't know, you're drunk, can't be, it's impossible. They discounted him completely. A couple of days later, someone else comes and talks about the horseless carriage. And he describes it. And they say, it's not possible. There are no horses. How does a piece of metal move? Fire? They all know what metal is. You heat up a piece of metal. What happens to it? It turns red. That's all. It doesn't move. How could you heat up metal and it should move? So he said, I'll draw you a picture. So he takes a piece of charcoal and he draws a picture on the village square, and he's explaining to them. And most people just say, the guy's nuts. He's simply crazy. Until finally, when a third person comes, they have to investigate. So they figure they're going to send a representative of the village. They take the most scientifically inclined fellow. Someone that's, of all the geniuses, he's the genius of the geniuses, and he's going to go and investigate. He goes to Bialystok, the big city, stays there for 3 weeks, and he comes back. The first thing they ask is, did you see it? He said, I saw it. What did you see? He said, I'll show you what I saw. And he draws the picture. Not only did it look like the first picture, but it was actually much more intricate. It had a lot of details. And he said, you actually saw it? He said, I just drew it for you. I was there with my own eyes. I saw 2 carriages. There must have been 40 people there. It was a big, heavy piece of metal. And I saw the wheels going, and I saw smoke, and he pantomimes, and he plays out the whole thing. And they say, wow, what a marvel. He says, but you know what the most marvelous thing was about the whole thing? Where did they hide the horses? Okay, where did they hide the horses? Okay, getting back to crazy for Mashiach. Crazy for Mashiach means that you can't tolerate golus. I have many weaknesses. One of them is when I talk about Israel. So I'm just going to mention something. Just mention something. The security situation in Israel has really been as bad. Surrounded by enemies without and enemies within. God forbid it should never happen that in the Richmond district there are stabbings every 2 hours. I cannot imagine us here in San Francisco tolerating that. There would be a massive demonstration.
Us Jews or the Gentiles?
No. Anyone being stabbed in the street every 2 hours,
You think? Okay.
and the cops are not doing anything? Are you crazy? We want the FBI, we want the CIA, we want the Army, we want the National Guard, we want... No, and the mayor says, San Francisco is a very, very liberal place. We have to understand that with good comes bad. I mean, basically, the city would shut down. In Israel, we all know the situation. What we read and what you don't read is even worse. They don't report everything.
Right.
What is the difference? Without getting too deep into this, Israel has learned to tolerate the impossible. They basically say this is part of life. People getting killed, that's terrible. People are frightened, that's terrible. But we got used to it. Could you imagine getting used to something like this? And this is in front of our eyes. This is not theoretical. This is not theoretical. These are people that are smart. These are people that have an army. These are people that travel. These are people that are on the internet. These are people like me and you. And what we could not imagine, heaven forbid, in a million years, tolerating in San Francisco, they're tolerating in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv and in Haifa and in Ashdod. And what could we do? What do you mean, what could we do? We have to live with it. Hashem will have mercy upon us.
Let's hear it.
No. Just listen to the problem. What happened was that they made peace. I don't know if the word is peace. The word might be, I use the word tolerate. That's actually a good word. Another word would be they're accepting what's unacceptable. Jewish people have been in exile for almost 2,000 years. That means for 2,000 years we haven't had a temple. For 2,000 years we've gone through a lot of suffering. We've got a lot of expulsions, a lot of bad, a lot of no good. And even when it's good, it could be a lot better. And guess what happened? The Jewish people have said, we got used to it. Oh, what can we do? So 3 times when it comes to the prayers, because our sins, we've been, please return the temple. And then we just go further on. It's not that we didn't mean it. It's a sincere prayer. Please make the temple come back. Please bring us back to Israel. Please bless your nation with peace. But it's a prayer. But it's not the real world. And in the real world, we have to get used to living in a world of darkness, spiritual darkness. And when you hear this person is not well, or this person is mentally not well, this one is spiritually not well, this one has this problem, you say, oh, well, what can we do? The Mashiach has not yet come. And everyone goes like this, sincerely. We empathize, and it's terrible. It's supposed to be like this, because the Mashiach hasn't come. Comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe for 40, 50, it's already 60 years now. And he says, what do you mean that you're satisfied with a krach, with a groan? This is intolerable. What are you talking about? You're in shul and you're willing to say, I'm willing to stay in shul in exile? Absolutely not. You should put your foot down and say, Hashem, we're not leaving the shul until Mashiach comes. Well, I wish I could say that I feel that, but I heard that. That's what he was saying. And to Klal Yisrael, he's saying, so now it's one of the better times, right? So you have a yeshiva, and you have kosher pizza, and there's Baruch Hashem, people are making money. It's beautiful. And you're in Golis. Well, you make peace with it. The Rebbe was crazy. Only one man who's a leader of Israel who stuck himself out, instead of saying, you take a look at leaders of Israel, they go in three different directions. One is the negative, which is, let's give up. Let's do assimilation. Let's go to the LCD. Then you have the other side. You know what? It's never been better. We have so many yeshivas, so much time. The Talmud is being studied today in English, in Hebrew, in Yiddish, in French. I think they have now a Spanish thing. I mean, where in the history of Talmud of 1800 years do you have thousands of people studying an ancient book in modern language? It's never been better. Well, we're the greatest. We're the greatest. It's not as good as Mashiach, but we're the greatest. And then there's the Rebbe, who says, yes, we've done a lot of accomplishments, and no, we should not give up, but we can't be satisfied. You know, it's funny. It's really not. I use the word funny. There's a much better word. But when I have guests, I try to not quiz them. I try to learn from them. Believe it or not. And it was interesting. He told me, my guest. He says, in Garrett, we don't have too many Balchas. He told me, we don't do too much outreach where we are. And I didn't pursue it. Okay. How could it be that a large segment of holy Jews simply doesn't, I don't know if the word is care, or how could they be so uninvolved, is a better word. How could they be so uninvolved with their neighbors? And we're not talking a different country. We're talking about a neighborhood, literally, like you have the East and West, the turf of this group and the turf of that group, and you cross it, you get into a fight. I mean, we have places in Israel similar to that. This is a Jewish, neighborhood. A woman doesn't walk around with sleeveless, and every guy wears the black hat with the white. If you walk in with shorts, you're stared at. This is our neighborhood. Respect us. And then you just cross the street, and it's a different world. This world saying we could tolerate gullahs because we're okay. We saved ourselves. We protected ourselves. God loves us. In fact, we're one of the pillars. The world stands because we're doing God's commandments, which is not wrong. It's true. Maybe it does. Said the Rebbe, I'm crazy. Am I the only one that sees the darkness in this world? Am I the only one that cares about another Jew? Am I the only one that sees that what's happening in Israel is worse than a death wish? It's a desecration of God's name on a daily basis. That a wise and understanding nation has treated themselves to be less than a third world country. They have no dignity. Am I the only one that sees it, says the Rebbe? I need 10 crazy men. He says, give me 10 people that are crazy, the Mashiach would come. And I often wonder, Chabad has a lot more than 10 crazy people. But they're not crazy in the way he wanted them. He wanted them to be crazy to say, we cannot go to sleep when there's gullahs. And unfortunately, I have a lot to grow into, because I'm going to go to sleep, God willing. And I'll say, we're in gullahs. But the Rebbe never did that. The Rebbe, if he ever went to sleep, it was with a broken heart. And he woke up full of, today I'm going to bring the Mashiach. And that's what I want to end with. The Rebbe's message is every one of us is incredibly talented. There isn't an untalented Jew. We're incredibly talented and we love God. We should do whatever we can to bring a fellow Jew into the fold, encourage, advise, elevate, and no Jew should ever be satisfied with the status quo. That's completely unacceptable. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. Yisrael, Mashiach will be here this year. Yisrael, Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. Yisrael, have no fear, Mashiach will be in this year. Yisrael, have no fear, Mashiach will be in this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we got